Room237, back with another kind of random review. This is another film that I picked up recently when I grabbed a handful. And this is one that I've actually never heard of, and I actually didn't know that it was a made-for-TV movie until I started reading about it. But I saw the cast, I saw the director, and I saw that it was a release by Kino Lorber, which I really like their releases, and that it was only $2. I couldn't believe it was $2. And I read the premise, I was like, well, that sounds very interesting. And yeah, this is the directorial debut of Frank Darabont, who, I mean, huge career. Directed Shawshank Redemption, The Green Mile, The Majestic, The Mist. He wrote and or co-wrote Elm Street 3 and The Blob, both directed by Chuck Russell. I know he wrote 2 episodes of Tales from the Crypt. I want to say he was one of the producers of that as well, but he was one of the executive producers and developers of The Walking Dead. So Frank Darabont, fairly big career. This was his directorial debut, and it often gets overlooked, believably so. I mean, when you would go on to do things like Shawshank and Green Mile and stuff like that, your earlier work is gonna get overlooked. But it's from 1990. Again, it's a made-for-TV movie, and it is Buried Alive. Now, it stars a great cast. You got Tim Matheson of Otter from Animal House. You got Jennifer Jason Leigh, who was in everything from Fast Times at Ridgemont High. She was the female lead in the original Hitcher, very underrated 80s horror flick. Love the Hitcher. Great performance in Dolores Claiborne, which I think Frank Darabont directed that too. I could be wrong, but I think he did. But she was in that. She was in The Machinist with Christian Bale. Daisy Domergue in Hateful Eight. I've always liked Jennifer Jason Leigh. Which, oddly enough, when she's younger, she looks... I always thought she looks a lot like Ally Sheedy. There is a 1997 sequel to this that Tim Matheson directed, and Ally Sheedy is in it. You got William Atherton, Walter Peck from Ghostbusters, and Hoyt Axton, who was Billy's dad in Gremlins. Now, this kind of plays out like a Tales from the Crypt episode. It is like a morality tale and revenge. The third act does kind of get a little hokey, almost like a Tales from the Crypt episode. But as far as made-for-TV movies go, this might be one of my favorites. I mean, I haven't talked about too many on this channel. I will say I'm not the biggest fan of maybe any of the Stephen King TV movies, except for maybe The Stand. But, you know, I reviewed and was very impressed by Dark Night of the Scarecrow. Home for the Holidays I was impressed by. So, and I do agree with Rainbow Rat for Life. If this had been done by anybody else, starring anybody else, this would have been a pretty lame, cliche kind of Lifetime movie, like a throwaway Lifetime movie. But I guess this aired on the USA station. It was made for $2 million, and it looks great. I mean, the only thing that really makes it feel like a TV movie is you do get the fade to black, like before a commercial. You still get that. Other than that, it feels like something that could have been theatrical, and that's, I think a lot of that goes towards the cast and Darabont's direction. Now, this was also based on a story by David A. Davies. Now, I don't know if that means it was a story he had or if it's a book. But screenplay Mark Patrick Carducci. Michael Colombier, if I pronounce that correctly, he did the music, and the music is awesome. Especially the sequence of Tim Matheson when he's buried alive and comes back to life. That whole sequence with the music, it's this pounding like 90s drum beat with it's a great piece of music. Really sets the atmosphere with the thunder, the lightning, a guy trying to get out of this grave, and he does. So lost my train of thought for a second. And the cast also does a great job. I mean, Tim Matheson plays a very likable guy who's a contractor. Jennifer Jason Leigh is great as just this totally despicable, resentful, deceitful, greedy bitch of a wife. And of course, how can you not hate Walter Peck? I mean, he is just as much a sleazebag as in Ghostbusters, but a very different kind of sleazebag. And the story is Tim Matheson as Clint, successful contractor. He married Joanna, Jennifer Jason Leigh, and he spent 5 years building this dream house, which is out in the country, his hometown. They've been trying to have a baby for 1.5 years, but it hasn't worked, and she wants out. She's originally from the city. She hates the country life. She wants to be in the city, the lights, the money. She wants that life back. Come to find out, she's having an affair with Walter Peck, who is a doctor, and they devised this plan and I'm just going to call him Walter Peck throughout the whole review, because to me, he'll always be Walter Peck. He's got this aquarium in his apartment with this special kind of fish that if you extract a gland out of the ovaries, you get this toxin that will send the victim into cardiac arrest. So they have this murder plot so that they can sell his business and, obviously all the insurance and accounts and everything else, and then head for the tropics. He also mentions, and then we can get my clinic going down at the tropics. But it doesn't go that well. She kind of messes up, gives him a very light dose. And I will say it's written well enough so that all the steps to making it so he can come back to life and get out isn't super far-fetched. It does kind of plant the seeds as to how this could happen. But then I'll say, up until once you get to the third act, it does kind of get hokey. But, where Peck is the doctor at the scene of his death, he says an autopsy isn't really necessary. She doesn't want to wake. She just wants a cheap funeral. You just throw him in a cheap coffin and bury him as soon as possible. So they have this water-damaged coffin that they tarnish to look new, and they go ahead and bury him. So, and the funeral home finds this out just as they're getting ready to embalm him, which I want to get the name of the embalmer, if it'll tell me. Brian Libby, who I know he was one of the guards that executed Ted Bundy in the Michael Riley Burke Ted Bundy film from 2002. And this is one of those movies where just as it gets to a certain point, it's because also the sheriff, played by Hoyt Axton, who's like best friends with Clint. Every time he walks to console Jennifer Jason Leigh, it shows the vial, the empty vial the toxin was in, like right by his foot. So they keep looking at each other like please don't look at it. And then of course, just as he's about to be embalmed, that's when they're told, you know, don't embalm him, just throw him in the cheap ass casket. And so the night of the funeral, they're celebrating. It's a thunder and rainstorm, and it does look cool. Like, you get these great shots of like overhead going straight down to the ground, and then like fade to black, and we see just like coming up towards the camera, him lying in his coffin with just all black around him, just zooming in on him screaming. The coffin's so weak, he's able to bust through it, and he is able to reach through the ground, like get his hand through the surface, like with just his arm, which is not 6 feet, but you know, I can suspend my disbelief long enough. And then, you know, he makes his way home and finds out, you know, he finds them together. There are some twists that I won't spoil just yet. And he decides to get his revenge. And all the while, Jennifer Jason Leigh and Walter Peck just become more and more despicable characters, which makes the revenge all the more sweeter. And they also just do a great job of it. And again, I love that music when Clint is climbing out of his coffin and he's walking home. So I'm going to say spoilers here. I'm sure you can find this on some streaming, but I mean, I found this at the store that I go to for $2, so I'm sure you can find it cheap somewhere. But if you like more thriller horror movies, which, like, again, this is a sort of twisted thriller Lifetime movie done right, with great direction, great acting, great story, great twists and turns, great suspense moments that can rival like a De Palma film. Like, when he comes back to the house, he decides to wait down in the cellar, which is where they keep the shotgun. Well, actually, they keep it up by the door, but he decides to go after her, and you know, his whole body's weak. He doesn't have much use of his hands or arms, so like, he drops the box of shells. They fall down the stairs. So it's like he gets one in it. He makes it back up the steps, and he sees both of them together. He decides to kill both of them, but he's got one shell, so he got to sneak all the way back down there. And there's a twist at that part. So there's just plenty of these suspense moments to really help keep you interested. Also, even when she's trying to poison him, she puts it in a wine glass, but then he comes in, he kind of jumps her, and then all excitedly he grabs both glasses and goes to sit down, and she loses which one's which. And of course, well, one, he's already hell-bent on revenge when he comes out of the ground, because as he's dying of cardiac arrest, you know, he's writhing on the floor. She like trips, so she's laying on the floor. He's like crawling on her, like begging for help, and she's just yelling at him to die. So he knows that she's a part of it somehow. So he was hell-bent on revenge anyway. But then when he gets there and sees them together and more unfolds, he there's that moment where he opens the shotgun, takes the shells out, and he's like, that'd be too easy. And he decides to set up this elaborate plan. And yeah, there are some cheesy, like, lines. Like, you know, he's covered in dirt. He has the shotgun. And there's, like, the music builds, and then it cuts, and he just says, "Honey, I'm home." It does have those, but the rest of the movie is so well made that it's very easy to forgive stuff like that. So I'm going to get to spoilers here, but it does kind of play out like a Tales from the Crypt episode. And I mean, there is some dark humor throughout the film, and just enough like little character moments that just make you hate these characters. Like when she sells the company for $1.5 million, they go over to her house and they open the case, and the guy's trying to say, like, no, I'm sorry it had to be this way, but I think you're doing the right thing. It's what your husband would have wanted. And she's not even listening. She's just like rubbing the cash. She's in awe of it. But yeah, I was very impressed by this. Definitely one of those good, like bad marriage thriller, revenge thrillers. And even with the restrictions of TV as far as violence and language, budget, production, this definitely made the best of his $2 million budget. I was very impressed by this. So, spoilers. While he's got the shotgun ready and he's listening to them talk, he hears Walter Peck say something about, like, hey, you know, if it wasn't for you getting pregnant, you would have never come into my life, and I took care of that problem for you. Revealing that, no, it's not that they haven't gotten pregnant in the 1.5 years that they've been trying to conceive, but she did get pregnant and went to get it aborted and fell in love with the doctor that performed it. That's when he decides, you know, it'd be too easy. But at one point, he's able to lock... Well, you also get this great scene where, you know, she took a bunch of anxiety pills and passed out. So he goes to the bathroom to shower up. And you get this great scene where he fills the sink up with hydrogen peroxide because his hands are cut to shit from getting out of the ground. He's got to bite down on a towel, stick his hands in it. But he's also got this Rottweiler that she hates. And there's a scene where, you know, she's fine. She tries to shoot him once, but shoots his gate, and he runs off, and he sits by the grave when Tim Matheson comes out. But the second time she goes to shoot him, she's standing like right in front of the cellar door, and that's when Tim Matheson comes out, wearing like a welder's mask. Scares her, so she goes to shoot him, and the recoil just sends her down the stairs, and she's locked down there. And then we see Walter Peck extracting more toxins from a fish, putting it in a syringe, and so we know, oh, now he's going to go after her. He's such a sleazebag that, you know, he wanted her to get all the money just so he can kill her and get it all for himself. Which, I mean, really makes him seem more despicable, but Jennifer Jason Leigh's character is so awful anyway that you kind of root for that. But you also find out in a voice message he has that he's 6 months behind on rent. He's going to be court-ordered to leave his apartment. He's not rich and lavish like she believes. He's actually broke and pathetic. But shows up to the house, finds her down in the cellar. She knocks him out because she thinks he was the one doing whatever in the house. And then they're locked in there for a long time. They just hear banging and chainsaws and something going on upstairs. And yeah, she does find the syringe, and that's when he admits, like, okay, yeah, I want, like, there's no us, there's no clinic. I was gonna kill you, take the money, and run. Which I'm glad she got to hear that she was deceived, just as Tim Matheson was. The third act is symbolic, but I do think it gets a little hokey. I know I've said that a few times, but earlier in the film, when she says she wants out of the town and go back to the city, and he says, you know, I built this for you. This is our dream house. She says, it feels like a giant maze, and I'm the rat. So when they're finally let out of the cellar, he's remodeled the whole house. So it's just all these wooden tunnels that he can, like, slide a wall out of the way to let them advance. And I think Peck says at one point that they've been down there for 8 hours. I can buy him crawling out of a water-damaged, cheap casket. I can buy that, but for some reason I had a hard time swallowing him putting this whole maze house together in 8 hours. But, yeah. Not that it gets too extreme, you know, like a Saw movie, like it's this big fun house. It's just a bunch of tunnels that he opens up. But eventually gets them separated. He thinks it's the sheriff, which there's a subplot going on where the funeral home calls the sheriff because they find the hole at the gravesite. He takes the casket with him. He has them cover it back up. And there's a scene of him in his cellar where he's looking at it, and then he punches through the lid, showing he knows that no one broke in, he broke out. And he's starting to put it together. So Walter Peck is allowed in this corridor, and he's trying to offer money. You know, he's got all the money in this suitcase, and he's trying to be slick, like, well, come on, we'll do 50-50, 60-40, 70-30. He's trying to bargain with him, but he's got the syringe also. And then Tim Matheson just steps out, he's like, keep it. He trips and falls, lands on the syringe, and we get another one of those crazy zooms as he screams. But then another wall opens, he steps out, and she has to, like, run and crawl through this other tunnel, which pretty much ends up in a box that he closes off. She still doesn't know it's him, but eventually, you know, he just, like, puts his mouth up to a opening. Is like, was our baby a boy or a girl? I guess it doesn't matter. Then he opens it, throws Walter Peck in there, sets the house on fire, drives off. And I do like the ending. I do like the very ending. Now, I buy an officer willing to cover something up in this film more than I do something like Texas Chainsaw 3D, where the cop is just like, clean this shit up. It's like, okay, you killed the bad people, even though this guy's a prolific cannibalistic serial killer. But he shows up to the house, it's all burnt down. When they don't find any bodies, that's when he figures, okay, he must have had a revenge scheme. Seems like everyone's taken care of. And you get this scene where the sheriff goes to the cemetery, where Clint is standing at his own covered gravesite. And he just walks up to him and he's like, yeah, this is a friend of mine. Did you know him? Clint says no. And he was like, yeah, died last week of a heart attack. I wish I could have told him what our friendship meant to me. Matheson says, I think he knew. And then he walks off. And then you get the idea that the sheriff knows it's him, even though he's standing back to, and it's his truck with his business name right there. And when he walks towards it, he just says, he yells out to him as Mister. He says, like, I don't know who you are, but don't ever come back here again. And he just nods. And, you know, I get it because it's a small town. Everything is sort of, all loose ends are taken care of. He was very good friends with him, and he knows that, you know, it was a murder plot gone wrong, and it was the murder of the revenge was justified. So even though I wouldn't normally buy something like that, I did buy it more in this. And then you get the great shot, which is total Tales from the Crypt type ending, where again it's from up above, zooms down to the ground, and then it goes through, and then we see the casket all black around it. Just Jennifer Jason Leigh laying in there with the dead Walter Peck and all their money. He didn't take the money, he left it with her as she screams for help. And then it just ends. And yeah, at first I thought that they were ixnaying like the autopsy so that they could not find any toxin, but I guess it was just because they wanted to speed the process up and just get them buried and collect on everything. Because I thought when he was first explaining it to her, he was making it sound like it will look and appear like cardiac arrest and it's non-traceable. But I guess they were just doing like no autopsy, no embalming, like just to speed it up. And also, well, I was going to say something about like how quick they are to sell the house, sell the business, and everything. How quick to get them in the ground. No one picked up on how fast that is. Like, that doesn't look suspicious at all. But, I mean, it's very well written. I mean, like I said, it covers its bases on how it can be believable. At least in how this guy could break out of this casket. I only found it hokey in the third act because of like the layout of like the fun house kind of maze, like how we would get that put together in like 8 hours. Yeah, he's a contractor, but I didn't think he would have all that lumber on hand, and he's supposed to be dead. I guess he could go out and buy it, but I definitely love the morality tale mixed with the revenge, done very much like a more serious Tales from the Crypt. But I think a lot of the humor lies in just how sleazy and slimy Walter Peck and Jennifer Jason Leigh are, which they are great in those roles, especially Walter Peck. I mean, you just look at the guy and hear him talk, and you already hate him. The guy's perfect for roles like that. Oh yeah, I guess he was a character like that in Die Hard as well. But yeah, I was very impressed with it. Again, great score, great camera work. You know, it does have some very nice style to it for a TV movie. Could definitely tell the budget was used wisely. It looks great for a $2 million movie. I forgot at several points that it was a TV movie. Only because the acting, the writing, the production, and everything is so well done. that the only thing that made me go, oh yeah, this is a TV movie, is when it fades to black, like as if there's a commercial break. I don't know if I'd see the sequel. I mean, I know it's an unrelated story. In fact, I know that they switch the gender roles, like it's a wife coming back to get revenge on a husband. But yeah, as far as TV movies go, this is probably one of my new favorites. This is up there with Dark Knight of the Scarecrow. And Dark Knight of the Scarecrow, that was another thing with the story, how well it was written, the performances, especially Charles. Oh, he was also in Dog Day Afternoon, but yeah, him in that movie, just everything comes together perfectly to make this work. And you can definitely see examples of this, or think of, like, if this wasn't made properly, then yeah, it would have felt like another throwaway Lifetime movie. But it wasn't. It's another good, like, scary marriage, a revenge thriller from the 90s. And it is unfortunate that it's overlooked as far as Frank Darabont goes, but again, when your career consists of things like Shawshank, Green Mile, The Majestic, I think Dolores Claiborne, and The Mist, I can see why, but even among those films, I mean, this is no Shawshank Redemption, but this is probably one of my new favorites by Frank Darabont. I mean, I was always more of a Shawshank fan than Green Mile anyway, but yeah, I'm just gonna end up repeating myself, but yeah, very impressed, especially for a TV movie. I thought everything worked. Third act was a little hokey, but other than that, very impressed. But anyway, thank you for watching.